Los Angeles, January 15th, 1947. A young mother pushing a stroller spots what she thinks is a discarded mannequin in a vacant lot along South Norton Avenue. She walks closer, confused by the strange position of the pale figure in the grass. Then she realizes it isn't a mannequin at all. It's a woman. Her body has been cut in half, carefully posed and drained of blood. Within hours, police swarm the scene, reporters crowd the sidewalks, and the city senses that this is no ordinary homicide. The woman will soon be identified as 22-year-old Elizabeth Short. The newspapers will brand her with a name that will echo for generations: the Black Dahlia. In this video, we're going to walk through one of Hollywood's most infamous unsolved murders, separating fact from legend, exploring the major theories and asking why, nearly 80 years later, this case still refuses to let go of our imagination. To understand the Black Dahlia case, we need to step back into post-war Los Angeles. It's 1947, neon lights, jazz clubs, GIs back from overseas, a booming film industry promising stardom to thousands of hopefuls. Beneath that glittering facade, though, the city is rough, corrupt, and often dangerous. Elizabeth Short arrived in this world chasing something better than what she'd left behind in Massachusetts. She'd bounced between relatives, military bases, and cheap rooming houses, picked up small modeling gigs, and told friends she dreamed of acting. When her body was found, the press didn't just report a murder, they created a character. They painted her as a mysterious femme fatale, the so-called Black Dahlia, twisting fragments of her life into lurid headlines. In this video, we'll piece together who Elizabeth really was, what we know about the crime, how the investigation unfolded, and why the case remains unsolved despite thousands of tips and dozens of suspects. Elizabeth Short was born on July 29, 1924, in Boston, the third of 5 daughters. Her father abandoned the family during the Great Depression, leaving her mother to raise the children alone in near poverty. Elizabeth grew up with health issues, including severe asthma, and spent time in Florida during winters to ease her breathing. Friends and acquaintances later recalled her as shy but charming, a dreamer who loved movies and romantic fantasies. When she moved to California, she used her dark hair, striking looks, and stylish black outfits to stand out, which some say inspired the later Black Dahlia nickname. She worked as a waitress, relied on a rotating set of friends, boyfriends, and acquaintances for housing, and wrote letters filled with big plans. There's no solid evidence she ever acted in a film, but like many young women in wartime and post-war Hollywood, she was close to the orbit of the industry, without truly being part of it. The last days of Elizabeth Short's life are a patchwork of confirmed sightings and hazy recollections. In early January 1947, she was in San Diego, staying with an acquaintance, a woman named Dorothy French, after spending nights in movie theaters. Elizabeth told Dorothy she was heading back to Los Angeles to meet a boyfriend, possibly a married salesman named Robert Manley, known as Red. On January 8th, Manley picked her up, and they drove north. They checked into a motel, slept in separate beds according to his later testimony, and the next day, he left her at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown L.A. Several witnesses say they saw Elizabeth in the lobby, making phone calls, seeming uncertain about her plans. After that, she disappears from the record. No confirmed sightings. No reliable timeline. For nearly a week, Elizabeth Short's movements are a blank space, a silence that still haunts investigators and fuels countless theories. The discovery scene on January 15th was unlike anything even seasoned officers had witnessed. The vacant lot sat between new suburban houses in Leimert Park, an area still under development. The body had been meticulously posed, severed at the waist with almost surgical precision, arms raised, legs spread, the face marked by grotesque cuts that would become infamous in case files. Yet there was almost no blood at the scene, indicating she'd been killed elsewhere and transported. There were no clear drag marks, suggesting the killer had carried or carefully placed her there. Nearby, detectives found a heel print, tire tracks, and a cement sack that may have been used to move the body. Despite such disturbing details, the case file photographs remain locked away from public view or heavily censored, leaving modern audiences to rely on written descriptions instead of graphic imagery. The overall impression, a calculated, theatrical display meant to shock. Within 24 hours, the Los Angeles Examiner got a tip from the police. They had fingerprints from the victim's body and hoped to identify her by matching prints from employment or arrest records. When the identification came back, Elizabeth Short, the Examiner moved fast. Reporters contacted her mother back in Massachusetts, pretending Elizabeth had won a beauty contest, coaxing personal details and photographs out of her before cruelly revealing her daughter had been murdered. That ruthless tactic set the tone. Newspapers dubbed Elizabeth the Black Dahlia, likely playing off the 1946 film noir The Blue Dahlia and rumors about her dark wardrobe. They framed her as a seductress, a drifter, a party girl, anything that made good copy. Stories embellished or invented details about her sex life, alleged criminal ties, even supposed pregnancies. This sensationalism would shape public perception, contaminate witness statements, and pressure the LAPD to solve the case under a relentless media spotlight. From the beginning, evidence suggested the killer might have medical or anatomical knowledge. The body was cleanly bisected at the lumbar spine using a rare procedure called a hemicorporectomy, typically taught in surgical training. The killer had removed internal organs with apparent skill and washed the body before posing it, leaving almost no blood. Forensic science in 1947 was limited, but the precision stood out. Detectives canvassed local medical schools, hospitals, and mortuaries, looking for anyone with access to surgical tools and familiarity with the procedure. Some pathologists agreed a trained hand was likely involved. Others argued a determined layperson with enough time might achieve similar results. Today, experts still debate how specialized the killer had to be. What's clear is that the mutilation wasn't random rage. It looked deliberate, methodical, and staged, implying the murderer wanted to send a message, or at least create a crime scene that would be unforgettable. Then came the letters. Just days after the murder, the Examiner and other Los Angeles papers received taunting notes, some written in a clipped, ransom style with letters cut from magazines. One envelope contained personal items verified as belonging to Elizabeth Short, her birth certificate, business cards, photographs, and an address book. The sender signed one message, Black Dahlia Avenger. The belongings had been carefully cleaned with gasoline to remove fingerprints, though one partial print was reportedly lifted from an envelope flap, later lost or rendered unusable. The tone of the letters suggested someone who followed the coverage closely and relished the attention. Were they really from the killer, or an opportunistic hoaxer who somehow obtained her property? Most investigators believe at least one package likely came from the murderer, if only because it contained items never publicly described. But with no DNA testing in 1947 and mishandled physical evidence, those clues became frustrating dead ends. The LAPD assigned one of its top detectives, Harry Hansen, along with a team of investigators. They chased hundreds of leads, interviewed more than 150 people, and compiled thousands of pages of reports. Police quickly looked at the last man known to see Elizabeth alive, Red Manley. He voluntarily came in, passed multiple polygraph tests, and his alibi for the critical days seemed solid. With no evidence tying him to the scene, he was eventually cleared. Detectives then broadened their search. Servicemen Elizabeth had dated, bar owners, abusive ex-boyfriends, even other women who might have been jealous. Tips poured in from the public, many influenced by wild newspaper stories. The sheer volume bogged the investigation down. Turf battles within the LAPD and with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department created more friction. At times, investigators seemed less in control of the narrative than the press, which continued to print sensational claims, whether or not they aligned with the actual case files. One of the most dramatic early suspects emerged almost by accident. In late January 1947, a man walked into the Los Angeles Examiner offices and identified himself as the killer, offering details he claimed only the murderer would know. Under scrutiny, his story quickly fell apart. He'd simply absorbed information from newspapers and invented the rest. He was one of many false confessors drawn to the case. Over the decades, more than 50 people have reportedly confessed to the Black Dahlia murder, some mentally ill, some craving notoriety, others pushed by overzealous detectives or authors. Each confession had to be checked against known facts, the timeline, forensic details, and verified evidence. None has held up. These hoaxes didn't just waste time. They muddied the public record and created myths that still circulate today. In a case already complicated by media distortion, every false claim made it that much harder to focus on solid, testable leads. When modern audiences hear about the Black Dahlia, they often encounter a lineup of prime suspects, thanks to true crime books and documentaries. One of the most famous is Dr. George Hodel, a wealthy, eccentric Los Angeles physician. His son, retired LAPD detective Steve Hodel, later argued that his father was the killer, citing alleged medical skill, proximity to the crime scene, disturbing family history, and supposed connections to other unsolved murders. Another oft-discussed suspect is Leslie Dillon, a bellhop and aspiring writer whose detailed knowledge of the case alarmed police. There's also Mark Hansen, a nightclub owner who knew Elizabeth and whose address book allegedly turned up in her belongings. Each suspect has intriguing circumstantial evidence around them, motive theories, proximity, inconsistent statements, but none meets the standard of proof most investigators would consider compelling. The case files contain dozens more lesser-known names, reminding us that publicized suspects are only a fraction of the story. Beyond individual suspects, some researchers see the Black Dahlia case as part of a broader pattern of violence in 1940s Los Angeles. The city was grappling with rapid growth, police corruption, and rising crime. Some theories link Elizabeth's murder to other unsolved cases involving dismembered or mutilated women, suggesting a possible serial offender. Others argue the Black Dahlia stands alone, so theatrical and distinctive that it doesn't match typical serial patterns. Over the years, amateur sleuths have proposed everything from police cover-ups to occult conspiracies to Hollywood insider plots. Most of these theories crumble under scrutiny, lacking primary documents or twisting facts to fit a narrative. What remains more grounded is the sociological angle. A vulnerable young woman in a transient city, a sensationalist press framing her as an object, and law enforcement stretched thin and sometimes compromised. In that context, it becomes heartbreakingly plausible that a single brutal killer could vanish back into the urban crowd. So what do we actually know as opposed to rumor? Fact: Elizabeth Short was a real person with documented family, friends, letters, and photographs, not the caricature painted by tabloids. Fact: she was last reliably seen at the Biltmore Hotel on January 9, 1947. Fact: her body was discovered on January 15th in Leimert Park, gruesomely mutilated and posed. Fact: at least one package containing her belongings was mailed to the press by an unknown sender who cleaned the items to remove fingerprints. Fact: the LAPD and other agencies investigated intensively for a time, but were hampered by media pressure, internal politics, and limited forensic tools. Beyond that, almost every detail, her alleged relationships, supposed criminal ties, accusations about her character, must be treated carefully. Many popular stories can't be traced back to primary sources. When we sift away the mythology, what's left is a brutal, unsolved homicide and a young woman whose life deserves more attention than her death. Looking back at the Black Dahlia case, a few key lessons emerge. First, the power of the press. Sensational coverage didn't just inform the public, it distorted facts, vilified the victim, and may have actively harmed the investigation. Second, the limitations of mid-20th century forensics. Today, DNA, digital databases, and advanced profiling might have produced a very different outcome. Third, the danger of mythologizing real people. Elizabeth Short became a symbol, a noir icon, at the expense of her humanity. That transformation encourages wild speculation, but it distracts from the core injustice. A young woman was murdered, and no one was held accountable. Finally, the case shows how unsolved crimes can echo for decades, shaping how we talk about violence, women, and fame. When we revisit stories like this, we should aim not just to be entertained, but to be critical, compassionate, and aware of whose narrative we're amplifying. If this deep dive into the Black Dahlia murder helped you see the case in a more nuanced way, consider sticking around for more long-form true crime history, where we balance storytelling with careful sourcing and respect for the people involved. In the comments, let me know which aspect of the case you find most compelling: the investigation itself, the media's role, or the suspects and theories. And if there's another cold case or historical crime you'd like covered, whether it's the Zodiac, the Cleveland Torso murders, or a lesser-known local mystery, drop that below too. Remember, these aren't just puzzles to solve. They're real lives and real communities forever changed. If you want more episodes like this, hit subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload, and share this video with someone who thinks they already know the full Black Dahlia story.